Terms and Conditions, Chapter 1. The Circle. Eli Vance had exactly 3 rules for his life, and rule number 1, never let Priya pick the group activity, was the one he should have enforced 2 hours ago. "It's not a real ritual," Priya said, kneeling on his living room floor with a laptop propped against a stack of library books, a bag of Trader Joe's candles, and a printout from a forum called r/Grimoire Gone Wild. "It's a TikTok trend. Half the internet's done it. You light the candles, you say the words, you get a little glowy circle, everybody screams, everybody laughs, we go back to eating pizza." "You said that about the Ouija board, too." "That was different. That was a cursed Ouija board. This is just like aesthetic." Eli was 26, underpaid at the university archive, allergic to conflict, and this was the part that would matter later, extremely precise. He alphabetized his spice rack. He double-checked door locks by hand even after the app confirmed them locked. He read terms of service, all the way through, every clause. Which was why, when Priya slid the printout across the floor and said just read it out loud, "It's basically Latin Mad Libs," Eli did what Eli always did. He read the whole thing first, silently, checking for anything that looked like a typo. He found one. A missing word in the final line, the closing invocation, the line that was supposed to end the circle, snap it shut, send whatever answered the summons right back where it came from. Some Redditor's transcription error, probably. He almost mentioned it. Instead, tired, half a glass of wine in, laughing at Priya's ET impression candle lighting technique, he read the whole thing exactly as printed. Missing word and all. The candles didn't flicker. They inhaled, all 4 flames bending inward like they were being sucked through a straw. The air went thick and syrupy, pressing on Eli's eardrums the way it does on an airplane. Priya's scream came out as a delighted, disbelieving laugh. Right up until the floor split open in a ring of cold blue light, and something considerably larger than either of them stood up out of the hardwood like it was climbing out of a swimming pool. It was 7 feet of shadow, an antler-shaped horn and eyes like held matches, and its voice, when it spoke, rattled the window glass. "Who DARES summoned the unrelenting?" It stopped. It looked down at itself, at the studio apartment. At the IKEA shelving unit, it had apparently just knocked askew with one shoulder. "Oh, hang on, is that a Peloton?" Silence. Priya's laptop played tinny outro music from an unrelated YouTube video no one had closed. Eli, still holding the printout, looked down and confirmed, with the sinking, precise horror of a man who has just found the typo after it mattered, that the final line was missing the word, return. "I knew it," he said to no one. Chapter 2, the roommate amendment, his name, the demon's name, the one he insisted on, full and rolling, with several consonants that didn't exist in English. Took Eli 4 attempts and 1 migraine to pronounce, and even then the demon sighed like Eli had called him Buddy at a funeral. "Just Vince," the demon said finally, pinching the bridge of his nose in a gesture so human Eli almost forgot the 7-foot silhouette and the twin curls of smoke that leaked from his collar when he was stressed. "Call me Vince. It's shorter, it's beneath me, I don't care anymore." "You're Vince, a demon." "A duke," Vince corrected, with the wounded dignity of a man correcting someone who'd called him Mr. instead of Doctor. "Duke V. Hasterox the Unrelenting, 31st of the Ashen Choir, collector of—" He caught Eli's expression and deflated slightly. "Look, it doesn't matter. Mid-tier, I'm mid-tier. There's a whole tier above me that does the real soul-collecting, apocalypse-adjacent stuff, and there's a tier below me that just, curdles milk and jams printers. I'm somewhere in the middle. I mostly do contract enforcement. Boring stuff. Foreclosures, technically broken promises, that guy who said, "I'd die before I let you marry him," and then didn't die." Priya, sitting cross-legged on the floor with the calm of someone whose worldview had just been comprehensively and permanently altered, raised a hand. "Question, why are you still here? Isn't the whole, don't you go back down after the summoning?" Vince's expression did something complicated. Embarrassment layered over irritation, layered over something that might, on a human face, have been relief. The binding wasn't completed correctly. He said this the way a man might announce a parking ticket. The final clause, the one that severs the tether, wasn't spoken, which means, according to the Infernal Contracts and Bindings Code, Section 12, Subsection C, he produced, from absolutely nowhere, a scroll that unrolled itself across the floor with the dry rustle of old paper. "I am contractually obligated to remain bound to the summoner's household, providing standard demonic service, until the terms of a proper release are met." Eli stared at the scroll, then at Vince, then at the missing words circled in red on his own printout, like the universe had personally handed him an itemized receipt for his own mistake. What, Eli said carefully, counts as proper release? 3 genuine wishes, Vince said. Granted, fulfilled, and accepted, that's the sticky part actually. Most people mess up the accepting by the summoner. Standard package. Until then, I legally cannot leave this residence, cannot reveal my nature to unbound third parties. A pointed glance at Priya, who immediately mimed zipping her lips. And I cannot stress how much this galls me. Render reasonable domestic assistance as befits a bound entity. So you're my, don't say roommate. Roommate. Vince put his enormous head in his enormous hands and made a sound like a mountain settling. Chapter 3. Reality TV Diplomacy. The first 2 weeks established a pattern Eli would later describe. To Priya, over increasingly necessary bottles of wine. As living with an extremely powerful, extremely anxious middle manager who happens to be from hell. Vince could not hold an intimidating aura for longer than about 10 minutes before he got bored of it and started asking Eli genuine questions about his day. He teleported, not walked, not phased, teleported with a soft, compressive pop and a smell like ozone and cinnamon, specifically and only to avoid doing the dishes, which he considered beneath a Duke of the Ashen Choir, but which he did anyway, resentfully, by hand at 3 a.m. Because he'd noticed, Eli got a headache from the smell of the dish soap Priya kept buying and quietly switched brands without saying anything. He discovered the television on day 4. He discovered a dating competition show called Heart of Ember on day 5. And by day 9 he was fully, catastrophically invested, live texting Priya during episodes with a phone Eli didn't remember buying him and absolutely intended to ask about later. She should not trust Braden, Vince announced one Tuesday, draped across the entire couch, horns nearly brushing the ceiling fan, a bowl of popcorn balanced with unnerving delicacy on one clawed knee. I've read 4,000 Years of Broken Vows, and Braden has the exact facial micro-expressions of a man who is going to need space in episode 9. You've read 4,000 Years of Broken Vows. It's my job, Eli. Contract enforcement. I know a bad faith actor when I see one. It's the eyebrows. Watch the eyebrows. Braden left in episode 9. Vince did not gloat exactly, but he did make Eli watch the eyebrows in slow motion twice, with the grave satisfaction of a man vindicated by cosmic law. It was around this time that Eli noticed the mismatch that would come to define the whole strange arrangement. Vince, who could not sit through a hospital drama without crying into a dish towel, was also, apparently, capable of things that should have terrified him. Eli came home once to find the building's notoriously nightmarish landlord, Mr. Petrosian, a man who had once evicted a tenant for owning a suspicious number of ferns, standing frozen in the hallway, sweating, agreeing in a small voice to fix the boiler by Friday. Vince was in the doorway behind him, not doing anything overtly threatening, just standing there, looking mildly disappointed the way a disappointed parent looks. That was apparently sufficient. Mr. Petrosian fixed the boiler by Thursday. What did you say to him? Eli asked. I asked him about his filing practices, Vince said, already turning back toward the television, where a rose ceremony was underway. Landlords have very interesting filing practices, contractually speaking. He'll be much more punctual now. SHH, this is the part where Marisol figures out about the group chat. Chapter 4. What demons don't get the wishes came up on a Thursday. Over the kind of low, easy dinner table quiet that Eli hadn't realized he'd started looking forward to. You could just wish me gone, Vince said, not looking up from the pasta he was, with great and unnecessary ceremony, twirling onto a fork with clawed hands built for tearing through iron gates. Get it over with. I'll grant it, you accept it, contracts cleared, everybody's happy. I could, Eli agreed. You keep not doing it. I keep not doing it. Eli agreed again and didn't examine that too closely, and Vince, who was, whatever else he was, extremely good at reading the things people didn't say out loud, because that was, after all, his entire professional skill set, didn't push it either. It was Priya, 3 glasses of wine deep on a different night, who said the quiet part loud, the way Priya always did. You know demons don't get picked, right? She said to Eli low, while Vince was in the next room narrating a Heart of Ember rewatch to absolutely no one because Eli had gone to bed and Vince didn't sleep. Not really, not the way people did. Like structurally. Everyone he's ever dealt with only wanted him around because they were forced to be, contractually, or because they wanted something from him. He said that to me once when you were at work. Said it real casual, like it wasn't a big deal. It's a big deal. Eli thought about the dish soap, about the boiler. About 4,000 years of broken vows and a Duke of the Ashen Choir crying into a dish towel over a rose ceremony because somewhere in there was a woman choosing to stay with someone freely, and nobody had ever chosen Vince for anything except leverage. He thought about the third wish and how easy it would be to make it disappear him, cleanly, contractually done. He didn't wish for that. He didn't wish for anything at all, actually, not yet. And that itself, without either of them quite naming it, became its own kind of answer. Chapter 5. Rowan Croft. The trouble arrived in a blazer. Rowan Croft was, by his own introduction, on Eli's doorstep on a rainy Saturday, an independent practitioner of the classical arts, which turned out to mean summoner, capital S, the kind who did it properly, with a licensed circle and a subscription to 3 separate demonology journals. And this was the part that made the temperature in Eli's apartment drop several degrees the instant Vince noticed him through the window. A working knowledge of exactly which improperly bound entities were sitting around loose in the city, unclaimed, ripe for the taking. "You have something that isn't yours," Rowan said, pleasant as a door-to-door salesman, holding up a tablet displaying. Eli's stomach dropped. A scanned, annotated copy of the exact forum printout Priya had brought over, complete with the missing words circled in someone else's red ink. A defective binding, very rare, very valuable, very illegal to just leave lying around unclaimed like that. "I'd be happy to take it off your hands, properly, legally. I have the paperwork." "He's not in it," Eli said before he decided to say anything at all. Something shifted behind Rowan's eyes, not surprise, exactly, recalculation. The look of a man updating a spreadsheet. "Interesting," Rowan said and left, and that was somehow worse than any threat would have been. Vince, once the door was shut, stood very still in the middle of the living room for a long moment. "He's not wrong about the paperwork," he said finally. Quiet in a way Eli had never heard from him. No eyebrows, no reality TV commentary, just 7 feet of something old and tired standing very still. A defective binding is recoverable by a properly licensed practitioner under the right filing. If he does it before your third wish clears, he can claim me. Legally. Cleanly. And I would have to go, and there would be nothing either of us could do about it, because it would all be very correctly filed. "Then we file first," Eli said. Vince looked at him. "You'd have to make the wish. All 3 actually clear before he does. That's the only clean severance that beats his claim. So we make them." "Eli," Vince's voice cracked just slightly on the name, the first time he'd used it without irony in weeks. "You know what the third one has to be if we're doing this right? It has to be genuine. It has to be something you actually want. You can't just wish me free to beat him to the paperwork. The code's very specific. It has to come from want, not strategy, or it doesn't count, or worse, it counts badly, and I end up somewhere neither of us wants me." Eli sat with that for a long, long moment, in the dark, with the rain against the window and the ghost of Rowan Croft's pleasant smile still hanging in the room. "Okay," he said finally, "then I need to actually figure out what I want." Chapter 6. The first wish Eli made 2 days later, sitting at the kitchen table with Vince across from him looking braced for something terrible. "I wish," Eli said, feeling faintly ridiculous, like a kid blowing out birthday candles, "for you to stop teleporting away from the dishes and just tell me when something's bothering you instead." Vince blinked. Whatever he'd braced for, it wasn't that. That's domestic, that's not even a real. Is it granted or not? It was granted. Small, quiet, real. Vince didn't teleport away from a single conversation for the rest of the week, including one where he admitted, stiffly, that the reality show finale had been genuinely stressing him out because he was worried about Marisol and didn't know what to do with worrying about a fictional stranger's romantic outcome, which was, apparently, a very new and uncomfortable feeling for a Duke of the Ashen Choir. The second wish came harder, 3 days after that, after a full afternoon spent with Priya poring over Rowan Croft's public filings, trying to calculate exactly how much time they had before his paperwork cleared. "I wish," Eli said, "for you to actually tell me the truth about what happens to you if Rowan wins, all of it, not the reassuring version." Vince told him. It took an hour. It was worse than Eli had let himself imagine. Not torture. Nothing so simple, just a long, gray, unchosen future of being traded and refiled. And used exactly the way he'd described that first week, except forever, except without even the small, unearned kindness of a stranger who'd accidentally, sloppily, kept him around anyway. Eli didn't sleep that night. Neither really did Vince. Chapter 7. The collection notice Rowan's filing cleared on a Wednesday. He arrived with a proper circle drawn in chalk powder, and Eli noted with the specific, useless precision of a man watching his own life go sideways, extremely correct grammar, a small brass seal from something called the concordance board, and an expression of polite, procedural triumph. Duke v. Hasterox, Rowan said, reading off the tablet. By authority of filing 4471 recovery, your defective binding is hereby. Wait, Eli said. Rowan glanced up, faintly annoyed, the way anyone is annoyed by a customer interrupting the terms and conditions. You've had weeks. I know. I've got a third one now. Vince turned to him, and something in his ancient matchstick eyes went very still and very careful, the way a man goes still right before he lets himself hope for something. Say it then, Rowan said, checking his watch. Doesn't stop the filing unless it's genuine, and I'd love to see you try to genuinely want something in the next 90 seconds. Eli looked at Vince, at the dish towel he still, absurdly, kept folded over one massive forearm from a crying jag 2 nights ago, at the horns that had put a permanent dent in the ceiling fan, at 4,000 years of contract enforcement standing in Eli's kitchen worrying, quietly and for the first time in his existence, about someone choosing to keep him rather than being forced to, and said the truest thing he had. I wish for you to have a real choice, not a contract, not a filing. A choice about whether you stay or go or come back or anything, that's yours, that nobody, including me, can file paperwork over. The room went white-blue and cold, the way it had the very first night, chalk lines flaring and Rowan's careful circle guttering out like a blown candle, his tablet screen dissolving into static. That's not a standard release clause, Rowan said, scrambling for the first time, sounding less like a salesman, and more like a man watching his own paperwork become instantly, catastrophically obsolete. You can't just wish choice, that's not in the code. It's in the want, Vince said, and his voice, for the first time since the studio apartment floor had split open weeks ago, didn't rattle a single window. It was quiet, human-shaped. That's the part you never understood, Croft. You file, he wanted. The chalk circle dissolved into smoke. Rowan, still arguing about jurisdiction, found himself and his tablet unceremoniously deposited on the sidewalk outside, door locked, by a force he would later describe badly in a forum post nobody believed. Chapter 8, Renewal. The apartment was very quiet afterward. So, Eli said into the quiet. Are you? I'm choosing to stay, Vince said before he'd finished the question fast, like he'd been holding the sentence ready for weeks and was terrified someone would take it away before he got to use it. If you still, I still. Vince exhaled, and something in the room that had been held taut since a candle first inhaled wrong finally, gently let go. They kept the couch dent from the horns. They kept Heart of Ember, which Vince continued to overanalyze with the seriousness of a war crimes tribunal. Priya kept coming over on Fridays, sworn to secrecy, mostly successfully. Mr. Petrosian fixed the boiler on time, every time, forever, out of what Eli suspected was pure residual terror, and Vince never once corrected the misconception. And every so often late, when the television was off and the apartment was dark except for the soft cinnamon endozone glow that meant Vince was thinking too hard about something, Eli would ask what was wrong, and Vince, who did not have to answer, who was, for the first time in 4,000 years, not contractually required to do anything at all, would answer anyway. Not because the terms said he had to, because he wanted to. End.